Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing? Yamez here with Island Metal Forge, coming in hot, and with us we've got Alexis from Transcendental Artist Studios and Adam from Speargrass Forge. We have a fun show to get to you guys today. Words. Um, so, a little bit of a quick disclaimer, if I may. This is obviously a pre-recorded show. You could tell because the light is hitting me differently. And the reason for that is because today Alexis is at work and may or may not have a signal. It is so we will try to be in the chat, as this is going to be set, as you know, obviously, a premiere video, so we can live chat with all you guys. And Adam will be at work doing things. so yeah. Just a little bit of a disclaimer there. Did you?
And even though I work on computers, we're actually restricted from having access to YouTube. So unless I'm on my break, I won't be able to actually join in the chat either. So I'll try and be there, but yeah, you never know what happens.
Right.
But yeah, so
schedule your break accordingly.
Yeah, enjoy your break.
I don't get to schedule my breaks. Yeah. My bosses do that.
And I will say this to those of you who are in the watch party, the premiere chat, and for anybody who watches this video after the fact. This actually, we are recording live right now in the channel members lounge, the members only. So this is a members only video. We've got quite a few people watching, and I think one guy is giving me the finger. I don't know. He's saying cut. So thank you, Kenny. In the chat right now to give shout outs because we love our members. We've got George Anderson, Stephen Parsons, Metal Man Productions, and I believe we also have Alexis P. Sullivan and Adam Flewell Smith is in the chat too somewhere. Yeah. So of course. All right, so to get on with the show and to move it along, because we got a lot to cover here. So start out with the how was your week? Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep. So I was just saying to Yam, it's just in the pre-stream, that there is a little bit of a time limit on recording night for me, because I still have to go to sleep in order to go to work, and unfortunately I didn't get to explain why. Is because last night, or yesterday for me, I had a terrible sleep. I only got about 4.5 hours because my dad actually came around, because my dad's doing some renovations in his yard, and he decided yesterday was a good day to come around and drop off some 2 tons worth of soil that needed to be dropped off for last week or so, and we had to unload it by hand. So 2 tons over the back of a truck, shoveling from early morning when I'm supposed to be going to sleep. It happens. I'm never going to turn down a visit from my dad, but and so I unfortunately didn't get to sleep until late. Then of course I worked last night 12 hours, and now I'm into today. But other than that, I have finished my my report, so to speak, to Port Arthur archaeologists, and I just waiting. Actually, I should be able to put it in some pictures into the chat, and Yames can show them of a 3D rendering of what the blacksmith workshop in Port Arthur may have looked like.
We did that already last week. Yeah.
Oh my god! Oh my golly! Did we actually?
And remember, and remember, I was all impressed that you are hoity-toity now, working hand in hand, with a government grant and dealing with the important paleontologists and archaeologists of Port Arthur.
Yeah. Did I show you? But were the ones I showed you the finished ones, or were they the drafts?
They were the drafts.
Okay, no, I've got the finished ones.
Okay, we can breeze through those briefly, because I remember last week it took about 45 minutes.
Yeah, no, it won't take 45 minutes this time. But what we can do is, while I'm pulling that up, hand over to Sully, and Alexis can tell you all about her week, and I'll get them into the chat so Yamis can pull them up afterwards. And it won't take 45 minutes this time, I promise.
All right. Yeah, my week, it's like I discussed on this week's episode of Alexis Unleashed. I have not been off since Tuesday before last. I mean, I've worked every single day, and I'm tired. I mean, it's like I 84 hours last week, 93 this week, and it just keeps going. And this coming week is going to be the same. No schedule. I mean, we're working every day. Tomorrow I'm actually working a double, so I could get off anywhere between 2 a.m. and noon. The next day, Monday? I don't know. We'll see how that goes, but yeah, I mean it's tiring, and I'm going to be here close to town, so I mean, like, I know I'm going to have signal, but I don't know when I get there if this rig's ready to go. I'm going to be cramming and jamming, straight out of the gate at 7 a.m. and it'll take me till noon to get everything set out. Or I could just be sitting there staring out my windshield waiting because they're not ready, and I won't know that until 7 a.m. So hence where I called Yamez. I'm like, hey man, maybe we could, pre-record the show because I may not be able to make it. And, by 7 a.m. it's too late to go any route other than, oh, okay, well, I guess we're just doing a Yamez show this week. And, anyways, yeah, this week I really wanted this is an important episode. So it's important that we all got together and for as much effort as we put into it, and and the fact that this month is actually what sparked this entire year's direction of shows.
It'd be horrible
Yeah.
to phone it in.
Exactly, and so I mean, and to be honest, if I don't know, not I, but not I mean, because even next week, if I'm working next week, Adam can take up my slack, and Yamez as well. But then the week after, same thing. It's like, well, if we're not all gonna make it, let's do this. I realize it's not ideal, but
it's a balance that we need to do.
it is better than phoning it in.
Yeah.
So, and I'm glad I came up with the idea.
In addition to brought up some good points for additional behind the scenes ideas. So, and
yeah, indeed, a lot of channel adjustments came up today in our discussion about 2 hours ago. So
yeah, and we'll go over that soon. But all right, so my week. Well, I actually had a fantastic week, even though it was a ball buster at work the past few days. So, as you remember, last Sunday evening, I did not go live. My brother and sister-in-law were in town, and pretty much the whole time that I would have been live, I was on the phone with them, watching their Google Maps live view thing, and, on the phone chit-chatting with them and everything, and then guiding them in, and things like that. And then they showed up, and they were gonna camp in tent out in the driveway, but yeah, they showed up and it was raining. I'm like, just put up the air mattress, set up the tent tomorrow. And then it's like, all right. And then it was like, screw the tent, let's just go have fun. Took them over to Windfall, the rental property we're working on, to show them what all I've been doing there. And then Tuesday, took them down to the beach, and man, there might be a nice change for me. I might put my diesel up for sale or trade in or something, and get me a fancy one of them fancy gas vehicles instead of a diesel, because we took his car, I filled it up by me, and then I drove it for 9 hours up and down the coast. Okay. And it maybe used an eighth of a tank of gas. It was fantastic. I was averaging 50 miles a gallon. I loved it.
How much diesel would that have used in your pickup?
I would have probably had to fill up once or twice. Yeah. I would have probably had to fill up once or twice. I easily drove 150 miles in their car. but yeah, so they had a blast and constantly getting messages. Hey, I want to come back. I want to come back. It's like, well, come on, come on. And yeah, so that was fun. And then, right back to work. And, right back to work to the point where I worked all day today. And we are actually booked out. My electrical work is booked out until, into June already. So busy, busy. And tonight's show, which is, I'm saying that so that the people who are watching tomorrow morning, tonight's show, Sunday evening's show, is going to be a project that I've never actually heard of them, and or at least in the style that I'm imagining. I got to do colonial door stops, and not the typical type that mounts on the wall so that the doorknob doesn't hit the wall. A type that stops the door from opening at a 90, or stops it at 90 degrees so it doesn't hit a lamp or a wall sconce. We'll deal with that. Yeah, tiny violin. I get you. I get you. Sorry, somebody in the chat's like a tiny violin.
You obviously weren't watching the screen.
No, I wasn't. I was doing my producer work on my number one screen.
We were both mimicking the tiny violin.
Oh. Yeah. So yeah, that was my week, and it looks like Adam would like to claim some time and show us. You guys are gonna go off. Nope, too late. I already switched. All right.
Yeah, not too much time. I'm not going to take up too much time. It's just quickly. So yeah, so the 3 pictures, they're finally rendered.
Hold on, I got to move them over.
Pretty much don't have to do any tweaks on them. There is one small tweak that I need to make, but I've got to upload the actual program to do it. But other than that, I'm just going to send them as is. This
person's bumping his head. Look at the roof line and look at how tall he is. He's bumping his head. Okay.
Not bumping his head.
Whatever.
He's up in the ceiling. he's up in the rafters. Now the reason for that is because he has to load the cup holder. That's why it's up there.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I mean, it's basically, this is the layout as per the archaeology Neron, and from what I can tell, and yeah, the only thing is if you look in the corner where the crucible furnace is, it's sticking out a little bit from under the base. That's kind of okay in the sense of, it probably would have, so you could get things in and out. But yeah, other than that, that's how I would have imagined it Neron to be. It was stone or bricked up initially, and they actually had a brickworks not far from the settlement of Port Arthur. So the bricks being made locally is actually a thing. So yeah, so that's it. That's all I wanted to show you is the finished product, and these are going onto the email to go to the archaeologists in Port Arthur very, very shortly.
Yeah, cool. Hoity-toity. Hoity-toity. All right. Get back to the camera. All right, cool.
Get back to the camera.
Yeah. So now that 45-minute interlude has happened. But yeah, so today's show, and actually it's the kickoff for this month's main focus, is Egyptian metallurgy, and and we're talking not like now, like going over there and you got some people beating steel. We're talking like pre-dynastic ancient Egypt, like the kind of stuff that they used to build the pyramids and things like that. And I believe back then it was the Copper Age. It was pre-Bronze Age, if I recall, because the Copper Age didn't start until, somebody stop me because I'm about to say something stupid. Not Ramses. When did the Bronze Age start with the Egyptian dynastic period?
Well, that's really arbitrary.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there.
Because no, I mean,
I was just trying to sound smart.
There's evidence of them. I mean, like all the way back to 7,000 years ago, 5,000 BC. There's evidence of them working iron, working copper, working bronze. I mean, they used all of them for different things. And so, the academia is like just saying, oh well, humans use this metal at this time, and then they moved to this one, and then they moved to this one. No, Egyptians were using iron 7,000 years ago. Not a lot of it because it was, yeah. Anyways, so
we'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah. I mean, so I mean, you can't really go, oh, it was Bronze Age, oh, it was Copper Age, because they were using all of the metals. Each metal has its own purpose and its use. So, you obviously, for things that were expendable, you used cheaper metals.
Yeah. Kind of like us now.
Yeah. And also like so they say that the Bronze Age, and I do that in inverted commas because just as Alexis was saying, they were using these metals long in a mixture and different ways long beforehand, but bronze became the predominant metal around 3,500-ish BC. And the pyramids were built about, I think it was about 2000, about between 2,500 and 2,400 BCE. So, they were using bronze for, they'd entered a Bronze Age, or was predominantly using bronze around 1,000 years before the construction of the pyramids. But you've also got to remember that in a lot of archaeological documents, bronze is a copper alloy. Right, so just like steel is a iron alloy, so even though there's a lot of archaeology that, they say, it says, it was an iron sword or iron weapon or iron this, it may have been steel simply because of the alloy components in it. So there's proof that copper was alloyed in Egypt long before the Bronze Age, and various sorts of alloys of copper, not just bronze. So just clarifying that, but we'll get a little bit deeper into that in a minute because Alexis is going to take away. Oh yeah, because Alexis is going to take away the first bit.
If I may,
before I get too excited.
Now, if I may, I'd like to posit a correction. Now, I've seen that Jack Black movie Year One. We know because of that movie that the pyramids were built in Year One. Right? That wasn't a documentary, was it? Never mind. I'm an idiot.
All right.
Shut up, Yames.
So as I was alluding to, the academia, like the scholars and whatever, they typically date, the Bronze Age, the Copper Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age to certain windows of history and prehistory. Like, well, from this time to this time was primarily this, and then and it rolls on, and that's how we categorize the industrial development of human civilization. But it's really arbitrary because it has no basis in archaeological evidence. I don't know what the word I was looking for right there, but things like articles made of bronze, articles made of copper, articles made of iron are found in these Egyptian tombs from 4,500 years ago. And then so they worked a lot of different things all at the same time. And well, like I mentioned earlier, it's like, okay, well, they didn't really make like weapons out of iron because it was really rare. It was hard to come by. And so it was they considered it to be the bones of kings or the bones of the gods because it came from the sky, meteors, I think 7,000 years ago, you see a meteor come down and hit over there, and you're like, okay, let's go check out, see what that was. And you go find it, and you get this rock that's really heavy and and you find out you can do neat stuff with it. Anyway, so they watch these rocks fall from the sky, and then so they were very very spiritually connected. Like these were the remnants of the pharaohs, the kings, the gods, what have you, because the pharaohs were gods, for all intents and purposes in the ancient or the old kingdoms. Um, and even though they knew about iron and to a certain extent they were even mining iron, they still never stopped using bronze. They never stopped using copper. They used all three of them all the way up through the Roman era. And I mean, Egypt was the largest and richest empire of the ancient world, by a long shot. They imported metals from all over that part of the world, Asia, Africa, Europe, that whole thing. The majority of their metals came from the Iberian Peninsula, which is we discussed that when we talked about Rome, because that's where Rome got its tin and its silver and its gold. And so iron was known to be mentioned in texts at least 4,500 years old. They're called the Unas funerary texts, and those are like 4,500 years ago, or yeah, 4,500 years ago. They're talking about iron like it's a common thing.
Right.
So they knew about it, they worked it, they used it. Primarily, and by a lot of these iron artifacts, there are quite a few artifacts. If you can, Yamaz, while I'm finishing up here, if you can pull up a picture of King Tut's meteorite dagger.
I
The
can
the
try.
the the majority of I did pull one up and all that, and I meant to put it in the chat, and then I didn't. So the majority of their iron initially was meteoric iron. And you can tell this because of its nickel content. Its nickel content is like 10 to 20%, and that is indicative of meteoric iron. Terrestrial iron on Earth is typically 5% or less, and usually 4, but every now and then you can get a little bit over 4. Let me scroll back.
If y'all just give me a moment, I'll get that up on the display.
Right. And so Egypt did not have a lot of metals that they used. They didn't have steel. Why did I say silver, copper, tin, lead? Even though they produced large amounts of electrum, they produced lots of gold. They mined a lot of gold there, and then they alloyed it with silver to make electrum, and electrum was the metal of the gods. It's what the gods were made of, so it was really really precious to them. And there aren't a lot of those type of artifacts remaining because they were recycled. I mean, 100 years after somebody made would cast a little electrum idol or something like that, and it'd be sitting on somebody's shelf, and they'd be like, that was great grandpa's statue. I mean, I bet we could get $30 for it. You take it down to the smith, and you sell it back to them, and they give you weight for it, whatever. And so a lot of these artifacts, the only ones that really survive are the ones that were in tombs. Now we know the Egyptians had large trade networks because they brought in raw materials from all over the African, Asian, and European continents, and they exported finished goods. So they brought in the ore, and then they exported finished metal products, like vases and chalices. I mean, just lots of gold and silver and whatever. Because we have found these ancient Egyptian artifacts in tombs all over the world.
I believe.
Well, I mean,
I believe it's
it,
pronounced vase.
encompassed by the oceans there. So all the way, the Asian countries, the European countries, the African countries. Well, I mean, they weren't countries back then, but areas, so to speak. All not all of them, but there have been tombs found in all of those areas with these Egyptian artifacts in them because they were traded for as long as 7,000 years ago.
Right.
Now they did a lot of alloying of even up to 4,500 years ago, had a very extensive knowledge of alloying copper with tin. And tin specifically came, just like in Rome, from one place. And we can track like because of the tin, we can track all of that because it all came from the Iberian Peninsula, and that is the tin route is it's a whole fascinating thing of being able to tell when things were made and where these things came from, and we can tell because of the isotopic content of the tin that it came from the Iberian Peninsula, and
One of those fun rabbit holes might be an interesting, uh, like an interesting little like heat map of sorts or something to have a visual to show the path from the peninsula. I'm not going to even try to pronounce it right. To all the different areas that from the peninsula to Egypt, and then from Egypt to and then like if you could track all of those artifacts and all those pieces,
and in addition to being able to work the raw metals, I mean, like, it blows my mind, but they were able to convert the metals into oxides and salts and various things, and then like combine them in with glass to produce various colors of glass. And up to 2,500 years ago, they were making artificial gemstones that at the time were indiscernible from the real thing. I mean, like rubies, sapphires, all of these precious gemstones. They were faking them 2,500 years ago, or well, more than that now. I mean, but 2,500 BC, they were faking gemstones by using metal oxides and metal salts and coloring glass. They were making glass, coloring it with these things, and then cutting it up, faceting it up, and they were selling fake gems. And even Pliny the Elder, in his writings, I talked about him. He was killed in the explosion of Mount Vesuvius, or the eruption of Mount Vesuvius,
Yeah.
in Pompeii.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Even he had written that the artificial stones coming out of Egypt were indiscernible from the real thing. Even pearls, they made fake pearls that you could not tell if it was real or not. And all of this is done by using different metal oxides and different metal salts and mixing it in with the glass.
Yeah, science.
Yeah. And then one other thing the last thing that I got is they were very adept at drawing metal into wire, drawing gold into wire so thin it was thread, and they wove it into fabric. So they could literally make shirts out of gold, and and and
Pretty
and
heavy.
and under microscopic, I mean, because this stuff still exists under microscopic observation, it's not there in during the drawing process. It's not flattened, so they weren't hammering it out into this like thin flat sheet. They were drawing it out into a thin wire, and then down to a thread, like like human hair thickness thread. And they were doing this 2,500 years ago, or 2,500 BC. I always mix up years ago and BC. There's a big difference between 2,500 BC and 2,500 years ago.
That's
Uh,
almost
but
4,500 years ago.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so
Quick math.
I mean, it boggles my mind. I mean, well, they did a lot of work in gold, and they would flatten the gold. I mean, like, take for instance, I mean, like, the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun, solid gold coffin, and then for the death mask is not it's not solid gold. It is it's porcelain, and it's
Gold leaf.
layered foil, gold foil,
Leaf.
because they could beat gold that thin, 4,000 years ago.
Gilded.
Yeah.
Gilded civilization.
And so they're for the time, they were the most technologically advanced civilization on the planet, and they maintained that status for probably 5,000 years. I mean, it's mind-boggling. People are like, well, how did they build the pyramids? They were the most technologically advanced civilization on Earth. That's how. And Adam, what do you got?
Well, and this is the thing, and it's partially Alexis's research that that led me down my wonderful rabbit hole, and it is so exciting. Now, mine also starts with glass. Okay, so it starts with glass for a good reason, and it's a little bit of a journey, so stick with me. So, as we know, as Alexis was just saying, Egyptians have had the ability to work glass for millennia. Okay. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is glass has the reason why you can use a glass kiln for forging. And the reason is because glass kilns can get iron up to it gets glass up to similar temperatures as iron. Glass generally, and I use this term generally because it does change depending on the additives that are used, generally can melt between 750 degrees Fahrenheit up to 1700 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the general forging temperature of iron is around 14 to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit. No, sorry, Celsius. I'll flip them around. Sorry, I'm talking Fahrenheit. I'm thinking Celsius, and it is Celsius. So, sorry. The forging temperature is generally about 1500 degrees Celsius. The melting temperature of glass is around tops out at about 1750 degrees Celsius. So, now the reason why that ties into things is because when you think of Egypt, what do you think of? Most people think of the pyramids, the Sphinx, and lots of sand
and aliens.
Stop it! I'm not doing it today, Yamez. Okay. Stop it.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You guys have all these wonderful scientific rabbit holes. My rabbit holes are all like hookers and booze. Come on, I gotta say something.
hey! If you could have looked into hookers and booze in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt. There's actually a theory, and you can look into this for next week's show if you like. There's a theory that part of the payment of the builders of Pyramid of Giza was in beer. All right, ancient Egyptian beer. So maybe you can look up ancient Egyptian beer because you can guarantee where there was beer, there was a blacksmith or a metalsmith in that time. But I'll get to blacksmiths in a minute. All right. So think of sand. We all know. Okay, so from this discussion, we know that they were definitely working glass, right? What a lot of people don't realize is that the Nile River Delta is one of the richest deposits and sources of black sand in the world. Okay, now it has a current estimate of resources of $11 billion worth of resources in black sand from the Nile River Delta alone. Now, as we all know, black sand is full of hematite and magnetite, which if they attempted to mix some of these sands and minerals in with their glass to get funny colors and stuff like that, and it's melted down into slag at the bottom of the forge, what do you end up? The glass furnace. What do you end up with?
Steel, iron. It's not iron, not steel.
Exactly, iron. Well, you might end up with steel. You might end up with some steel as well, particularly if they were using charcoal, or depending on the fuel that they're using, you probably ended up with some steel. So there is a good chance. And now a lot of the iron that they have tested in the beads and stuff like that has been meteoric iron. And that's, as Sully said, that's not only as a result of the nickel content in them, because this sand also contains a lot of nickel and also and titanium and other elements. The thing that separates that is the smoking gun that separates meteoric iron from terrestrial iron is germanium. There's very trace amounts of germanium, which is a radioactive element that's found in meteoric iron that's not found in smelted iron here on Earth. But with the amount of iron artifacts that's been found in Egypt, and also the fact that they've been moved or whatnot, being able to date them accurately can be a bit difficult because they're no longer in situ. A lot of the stuff that they've been able to date that's meteoric has been found with other datable things, engraved goods and whatnot. So, there may be iron out there that has come from the early Egyptian pre-dynastic and early dynastic period, the old kingdoms, that is quite possibly smelted or accidentally smelted iron that they can't date. So that's number one. That's the first thing of how sand ties into the development of Egypt. Surprise, surprise. But and this is all theory, of course. The second thing that is really, really interesting is black sand is also what emery was originally called when it was first being mined from the island of Naxos in Greece. Now, emery sand contains garnet and it's not is it corundum, the sapphire base stone?
Corundum.
There, Sully?
Yeah,
it is corundum. Yeah. So, yeah, what makes Naxos black sand particularly valuable was the levels of corundum and garnet that it contains in its sand. This is why it became emery. It became a worldwide resource about 1500 odd to 1000 BC. It started becoming widespread and mined. The interesting fact that I found is and this comes from a media release from the Egyptian government, is in Egypt, the black sand that comes from the Nile River accumulates on beaches in the form of sediment or sand dunes as a result of a collision of Nile water with Mediterranean waters. It spreads along the coast in the east, starting from the city of Rashid to Rafah, with a length of 400 kilometers. The reserve is 1.3 billion cubic meters with an average concentration of 3% heavy metals, so it's considered to be the largest reserve of black sand in the world. Now, on top of that, the Egyptian black sand deposit comprise of huge reserves of common economic minerals, including ilmenite, which is iron titanium oxide, magnetite, garnet, zircon, rutile, and moissanite. So this contains components that make it maybe not as good as emery, but an ancient equivalent of it. Now, where this becomes really interesting is it proves that the ancient Egyptians had access to a very effective abrasive that's better than quartz. Now, quartz has a Mohs hardness of 6. Garnet and corundum have a Mohs hardness of 8 to 9. Which means that it's only one step down from diamond.
Right.
And the Mohs hardness of granite is only 6. So this is an element that could have been used to cut through granite. Insofar that that's actually been proven. Now, in 1983, a pair of scientists at I'm just trying to find the university that they're at. They were at a university in the US. Did a scientific test, because in the late 1800s, there were 2 archaeologists in Egypt that posited a theory that that sand may have been used to cut through the granite. Now, this was a archaeologist by the name of Lucas. Just a second, I'll just try and find his full name. So in a job, a Lucas, and the second, which actually ties into Australia. So Australia has actually a finger in the pie of creating what we know as modern archaeology, because the second and the father of archaeology was named William Matthew Flinders Petrie. Now, the reason why I say there's a tie to Australia is because Sir Flinders Petrie, his grandfather was Captain Matthew Flinders, the captain and sailor that navigated and mapped the first maps of Australia, the first complete maps of Australia. So his grandson went on to be the father of archaeology, or father of modern archaeology, how we know it today, with all the pictures and measuring things and making sure that the descriptions and stuff like that were written down in situ so that they could actually be adequately dated. You're going to say something, Sally?
Oh, no, I had about 3 different things, but I was going to point out that the hardness thing, garnet is 8.8, corundum is 9.4, moissanite is 9.6, and then diamond is 10. And then that guy Petrie we're talking about, didn't he invent the Petri dish?
I don't know about that. I don't think so. I think that was the other guy.
I was just gonna say something about the old times, and okay, so the dad to the father of archaeology was the guy who mapped out Australia, and it gets me thinking, it's like, well, what'd your dad do? Well, what'd you do? I mean, different times. Different times.
Yep.
My dad did this, so I got to beat him and do this. Now everybody,
That's it. It was his grandfather, but anyway.
Yeah.
So back on topic. So Lucas and Petrie posited in the late 1800s that the cutting of granite was done by jeweled tubular drills with cutting points of emery set in the sides of the tube, both inside and out, and every mechanic, blacksmith or engineer, or back then it was a common term, who has examined the grooves on the core of red granite from Giza, agrees that nothing but a fixed point could have cut such grooves. Lucas said, as neither copper nor bronze is sufficiently hard to cut the stones of basalt, diorite, granite, quartzite, and schist, the harder material than metal is required to do the work, which must have been used either in form of fixed cutting points, teeth, or as a loose abrasive powder. In his opinion, it was a loose abrasive powder of finely ground quartz sand used wet. Loose quartz sand, which occurs in great abundance in Egypt, and Willowbrae quartz, which is the hardest stone the ancient Egyptians worked. So they both agreed that sand or an emery abrasive was used either fixed or loose as a cutting agent.
And in layman's terms, if I may, in layman terms, what that means, fixed or loose. Okay, so a loose abrasive with a cutting thing, they would take something along the lines of a copper bar in whatever shape with handles, and they would lay a line of the sand, and they would start sawing back and forth against it, using the metal to kind of push the abrasive into the thing. Fixed would be adhering it somehow to the blade. See, I am smart. Back to you, Adam.
Okay. So these two scientists, no, not Lucas and Petrie, these were scientists by the name of Leonard Gorlick and A. John Gwinnett in 1983, did a series of tests on granite using materials that Petrie and Lucas posited in order to test whether these materials could actually cut through granite. Now, of course, they did try it loose and dry. They tried it loose and wet with with either water, an ancient recipe of grease, and with olive oil, all of which were available to the Egyptians at the time. And then they also used it fixed to copper using an ancient glue or attached via grease. What they found, and I think this can soundly be put to bed, one thing they didn't test, though, before I continue any further, is they didn't actually test the sand or emery embedded into the copper, so smelted into the copper. That's one thing they didn't test because they apparently didn't have the facilities in trying it out. What they found was that dry sand or dry emery, when cutting into granite, and they used a piece of tubular copper, so a copper pipe. What they found was that the striations left in the granite from using loose sand and copper pipe both wore out the pipe very quickly, but also didn't leave the telltale concentric circles that is known on the granite cores that have been discovered both in Petrie's time and since. And it's one of the big things about the ancient disasters and the alien technology and all that type of thing. They say, these styrations they're continuous. They couldn't have been left by a tool back then. And using loose dry sand, and a copper pipe, this was true. However, what they discovered was when they started using emery in conjunction, because quartz sand didn't work in cutting the granite very well. It did make an impression, but it wasn't. It was both too slow, and the quartz would powder too fast. However, with the emery, what they found was that in using it in conjunction with a lubricant, be that water or oil, the striations were near on exactly the same. Now, this only improved with the addition of affixing the emery. The wet method also worked with the regular quartz sand. However, again, it was very slow. It wasn't as effective. The emery actually cut through faster. And what they however discovered was when the emery was attached or glued to the pipe, it near on produced identical marks to the original core samples, which is really, really fascinating, because it proves that this could have been done back then with the technology that they had available. And the reason why I say that is because when they were making these core samples with the piece of copper pipe with the emery glued to the outside, they were using an ancient bow saw, a bow drill. So it was a stick attached with a heavy weight and then a bow, and going back and forward in order to make the drill holes. So that was fascinating. That's the first thing. And that also led me to researching into emery and finding out that they didn't actually mine emery from the Greek islands until much after. And that's how I found out about the black sands of Egypt. Now, it makes much more sense that if, particularly for any early society, that they would have used materials that they had access to them. For example, about 80 to 90% of the pyramids of Giza are built from sandstone or limestone. Limestone is a stone which is prevalent throughout Egypt, but also has a Mohs hardness of about 4. So it was relatively easy to cut through with sand. And it was most of the limestone on Giza was actually mined within a kilometer or two of the actual pyramids. Now, one of the things that's positive, the granite, it did have to travel a fair distance. I think it was 500 kilometers, 500 miles. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. And that would have had to be brought in. But a lot of the conspiracy theorists posit that the whole pyramid was made out of granite, which is not true. It's only select areas, particularly the King's and Queen's chamber, and some decorations that were made out of red granite. But that also brings the production time down a lot. Second of all, how they would have brought it down the river is you've got to remember at that time, something that doesn't happen now, they had the 3 seasons. They had the planting season, they had the harvest season, they had the flood season, and where the waters of the Nile would rise. And if they were moving large stones like that, if I were them, I'd build the boat around or build the barge around the granite. And then when flood season came, it would lift up it and then take it down the river. That's how I'd do it. But it does prove, this does posit at least that they used local materials in order to do that. And now it brings us to the copper pipe. The reason why the copper pipe is interesting, and I actually spoke with Yamez about this, and he went, "Oh yeah, no, that's." I spoke to my housemate, so not Yamez. I spoke to my housemate, who's a plumber. That he goes, "Oh yeah, that's common knowledge. We get taught about that in our plumbing apprenticeship. Yeah, plumbing school. And from as early as 2500 BC, if not earlier, there is proof and actual archaeological proof, because they've dug it up and studied it, that the ancient Egyptians actually had quote unquote indoor plumbing in some of their temples, either to bring water in or to drain water out of their temples by using copper pipe. And now this I'm not sure. I couldn't find any information as to if it was cast or if it was
I believe
forged.
I believe we have a correction here.
Mm-hmm.
No, not a correction, just something to add. I was going to wait for
Gap.
whatever. Well, there's a gap now because I was waiting for Adam to stop his train of thought and then acknowledge. But so 2,500 years ago, 3,000 years ago, Egyptians were world renowned for their pumps. They
Like me.
their mining technology was superior to almost any that's ever been seen to date. I mean, the angles of the mines that they dug, the sharp. I mean, like they didn't just like curve off into the deal. No, they made a sharp exactly 90-degree turn with square corners and everything, and they went down, and just like mining is today. Today in the United States, almost all of our mining knowledge, and I mean not like heavy equipment stuff, but like hard rock mining, whatever. It all basically derives from the Spanish, because the Spanish are the ones that came and conquered the New World or whatever, and basically for mining, and and their methods are still used today, and they are kind of derivative of the ancient Egyptians' methods, but for the downstopes or whatever, because mines always angle in and down. They don't. I mean, you go in and down at a particular slope. Well, water inside runs to the bottom, and the Egyptians were world renowned for their screw pumps for dewatering mines.
Like
and
me.
there'd be somebody down there just turning it, and it's pumping the water out to through copper pipes out to outside of the mine. And there's somebody in there that's just working those pumps, and these pumps were traded and sold all over the world because nobody could make a pump with the screw and the barrel with as tight a tolerances as they could in Egypt. Continue.
And that's actually one of the things. Like, it's now credited to someone else, but the Archimedes screw was made by the ancient Egyptians. It's just that the Romans made it famous.
Archimedes was one of the first people to write about the Egyptian screw pump.
So they now call it the Archimedes screw. So it's that ancient Romans appropriating other people's technology yet again. But
Rome, will you
anyway,
ever learn?
That's it. But and as Sully was saying, these pumps were used all over the then known world, the known world to the Egyptians and the known world to the Europeans and the Turks and all that type of thing, in their mines. And they would buy them from the Egyptians because they had their tolerances and their ability to make these pumps and make them work properly and for long periods of time was incredible. So it goes to prove that the level of technology that people presume the ancient Egyptians have is nowhere near the level of technology they actually had. It's another thing like the ancient Romans, in the sense of, they had they were a lot more advanced than people give them credit for.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, they had indoor plumbing to temples and stuff like that from an ancient time that boggles. They put it this way: the common saying of Cleopatra lived closer to us than to the construction of the pyramids. Cleopatra lived closer to us than the invention of indoor plumbing. We think that's a modern invention, but there's even some I wouldn't say proof, but some evidence that they may have actually had in certain areas indoor bathrooms and stuff like that as well. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about they have indoor plumbing. So yeah, their coppersmiths particularly and their metallurgists were well advanced for what we think that they had. And this has been, what I'm talking about, what we think is the general public. Now, where this comes into how this whole series started was, if you look behind me, in the picture behind me, that is the underneath of the unfinished obelisk in I forget exactly where it was.
It's in Egypt.
I think it's in Thebes.
No, it's not in Thebes. It's
pronounced
in one of their
Thebes.
quarries anyway. It's in one of their quarries anyway. And as you can see underneath me, I'm not sure if I'm leaning the right direction at the moment. Let me double check. Behind me anyway, is all these styrations. Now, originally archaeologists posited that this had been done, and this stone right here is dolerite. And they posited that these grooves had been pounded in with dolerite. Basically, workers sitting there and just hammering these boulders of dolerite underneath and chipping away at the granite. Now, that is a potential thing, and people have tried it, and it's backbreaking work. And where we got into this whole rabbit hole for the last 6 months is we thought there had to be a better way. The ancient Egyptians are modern man. They are modern humans. They have our intelligence. They have our ability. They have our imagination. They have our laziness, right? Even though they worked hard ashore, one of the things about people is we're lazy. We try and find easier ways of doing things. And we know.
And they had an alphabet that consisted of 2,600 characters. So,
yeah,
that's it. And we know that they had the ability to do some amazing things. We've lost technology of them. So, what I originally said, because I originally came across Flinders Petrie's quote when I was editing and annotating Practical Blacksmithing. And it struck something with me in the fact that, they could have used emery. And we know that they used cutting implements like saws and sand. And I thought, but there's also evidence of circular saw work throughout some of the ancient monoliths and statues and all that type of thing. And there's, as we know, the evidence of boreholes and core taking, drill holes with cores. And we know that not only by the cores that we found, but by the bottom being broken off when at the bottom of the cores, and also some of the evidence that they've got in statues. They could also polish granite up to a high degree. So I think it was by using the black sand that they've got on the Nile Delta, because it's there. But also I think it was they actually, and I said this is how we got into it, because I said to Yames and I said to Alexis, I reckon they made circular saws with the emery embedded in it. And now we said this in January with ancient Rome and stuff like that. We giving you guys a little bit of something to try. But I'd love to see someone cast some emery or garnet, sandblasting element into some copper or a copper disc, and see if using ancient bow drill or something like that, if they could make circular saw cuts or make drill holes with cores and stuff like that. Like we know the drill holes have already been done with emery glued to a pipe. And I'll let Yames come up with the idea that we were discussing just the other day about the glue and the emery. But I'd love to see someone, and if I had the ability to do it myself, to cast some garnet or whatnot into some sandblasting element into some copper and see if it works, either as a drill or as a bandsaw, or, and the reason why I have this picture is as a cylinder. Right, may not be solid copper, even with a large copper pipe with it on the outside, because then if it was turning as it ground away like a belt grinder or something like that, it would
like a 2x72.
Yeah, but it would create these marks as a person using that piece of equipment would grind away underneath this obelisk.
Well,
And that's the thing that's intriguing me most.
you also have to take into account that the work that was done on this is 4,000 years old. So there's 4,000 years of weathering on those marks, in addition to what was left 4,000. So, I think about this all the time, because, like, having been to ancient ruin sites and whatever, what you see isn't necessarily
What they
the way it was left. Because I mean, like the Aztec ruins, the ruins at Chaco, these are the Pueblo Indians or whatever. The Aztec ruins were completely buried in the over the course of 800 years. They were completely buried in sand. They were just stumbled upon and then dug out. And we're talking about stone buildings that are 3 stories tall that were completely covered. Like the land had, I mean, it was just like a hill there. And then somebody's like, "What's this rock?" And they start digging, and they realize these rocks are glued together, and it's like, keep digging. But before it was covered with sand, sand was blowing and beating against these structures for hundreds of years and changing the way they look, the way they, everything about them.
Smoothing the edges, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, so, okay, so looking at Adam's thing here, I don't know how much of what we're seeing there has been affected by running water, by rainfall, by blowing sand. It's hard to say. I mean, the pyramids of Giza here behind me. I mean, you see the one little bit of marble that's left at the top of this one. All 3 of these at one time were completely smooth-sided and covered in marble, and that's all that's left. But it didn't really erode; it was stolen. But so there is a little bit of, I think, a little bit of wiggle room to look at something like this unfinished obelisk and go, okay, well, these marks are indicative of this. Well, what would these marks have looked like 4,000 years ago? And I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying this is or is not. I'm just like saying, there's a lot of erosion and stuff that could have happened. So, can you? I mean, like.
Also added to that, these things were just like, particularly the unfinished obelisk, they were discovered in a period where archaeology isn't how we know it today. And there may have been a lot of stuff that was lost, that was in situ, that's been sold or pilfered or, destroyed. I mean, for example, if they were using black sand as a grinding or element, right? These things were literally covered up to the top, up to then, and these ditches that are behind me, they're 8-9 foot deep, right? And they were full of sand and they were dug out. So if there was any trace of black sand or whatnot in there, that's long gone now.
It was probably confused with the sand that was dug out, diluted, so to speak.
Yeah. And even since then, it would have blown away, and with winds and storms and stuff like that. So if there was anything left, all that evidence is gone now. And unfortunately, that's something that happens particularly with old digs, and it's something that archaeologists struggle with today, particularly when they go back and do archaeology in something that's already been dug up, because there's a lot of stuff that's mixed in, that's no longer in situ, and they have to battle with that. Archaeologists love when new things are discovered. So Göbekli Tepe and the other tepe that was discovered not long ago, they're loving that, not only because it was buried, but it also predates, it's like 7,000 years old. It predates agriculture, and they were building monolithic temples predating agriculture. So, they're loving that because they're finding stuff from that period that's in situ, that hasn't been disturbed or unlikely to have been disturbed by anyone in the last couple hundred years. So that's why archaeologists love finding old stuff that hasn't been dug up before. But back onto the topic of Egypt, this is what started it all. This idea of not only blacksmithing but metalsmithing in general, because these metal artisans back then, we have no proof that they were just coppersmith or just bronzesmith and just tinsmiths and just blacksmith. Yeah, there is no evidence that one metallurgist or metalsmith did one thing. They may have back then worked with everything, or been in a workshop that worked with everything. So again, coming back to the glass and the ability to melt copper, they would have been exposed to iron from a long period of time. And my final thing on that before I hand it over to Yama so he can get into the bit that I said he can talk about on what we thought about this was my train of thought derailed.
Anyway,
No.
on to my bit of what I thought about this.
Go ahead. I'll get back to my thought in a minute.
Now, so when the original humans landed in their ships, no, I'm just kidding. It's too late in the day. I mean, early in the day. Yes, early in the day. No, like, so I believe what you're alluding to, my what we discussed was, that they'd have like a little bucket of hot glue, like pitch or pine tar or something, and they would sit there, and this was just my posited, like, oh, how would they go about adhering? What they don't have modern adhesions and stuff like that like we do, like but they did have some ancient glues that were pretty good. And our thought would be, well, they'd sit there with like a pot of hot glue, liquid adhesives, and they'd sit there and dip their pipe into it. Then like you would do a margarita glass, then dip it into the sand, into the emery, if you will, the black sand, and then boop, boop, and then set it where it needs to be, and work it with the bow drill and all that stuff. And then as it started being a little bit less effective, and anybody who's ever drilled through anything with a dull bit, you can kind of tell when it stops and needs to be resharpened. Like you're going and it's like, okay, this just ain't going anymore. And then they'd pull it out, clean it off a bit, dip, salt the rim, and repeat. And given enough time, given enough effort, you can get pretty dang far with it. I mean, 8-hour shift. Well, back then they probably did what, like 12-hour, 15, 16, 18-hour shifts. All right, you're drilling. What am I doing today, boss? You're drilling again. Same hole. Just like marriage.
But here's something that actually supports that, Yamas. Since I spoke to you, now the boreholes, right, with that have the actual core bits, right, 99% of them are conical, being wider at the top, slightly wider at the top, and thinner at the bottom. Now, if you think of the buildup of layers, right, of dipping in hot glue, dipping in the emery, and then using it again, the bottom's going to wear and the top's going to build up.
Yeah.
So it actually makes really good sense that that's exactly what they did.
Yeah. And when you say conical, you're talking the actual sense. It's not literally a cone, but like, whereas the top of the borehole, so to speak, would be just random numbers,
slightly wider.
20 millimeters, and the bottom, or the end of the end of the borehole, would be like 19 millimeters. We're not talking a fantastic change of where it looks, you scoop some ice cream in it and enjoy it. But, where if you were to take a 20 millimeter, ball bearing and slide it down, it'll stop at the end, Yeah.
Yeah. And they prove, and it's like you said, it's not that big of a difference, but it's enough.
Did somebody say they found my 10 millimeter socket?
Yeah, no, it's lost and gone forever. Oh, my darling 10 millimeter.
But yeah, so I mean, but that's I found that fascinating, and that's when I read that, I was like, Yamas might be onto something, particularly with the drills. Maybe not so much with the circular saw, because I mean, you could do the same thing with a circular saw type thing. I reckon that would probably be a bit more pain.
If I may say, on the circular saw theory, okay, I don't think they would have taken, and unless they casted it with it in it, so that as the metal wore away, it would expose new garnet and emery, etc. I think with the circular saw, a more likely situation is where they would have the apparatus set up and they'd have a team turning it, and then a team, with containers of the black sand, pouring it on at the start so that it drags it through, and then you'd have a team sweeping the used sand into containers and bringing it back to the start, and so on and so forth. So that it's a constant stream of adhesives. What is the word for abrasives? Yeah, a constant stream of fresh abrasives, as this thing is turning for, and with the way they do things, they could literally have that turning 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just by shifting, shifts, moving shifts.
And that's actually, this hadn't occurred to me, but that's actually a very viable solution because you don't run out of abrasive. The
just
abrasive
reuse it.
Carry back up to the top, and then you can sift out or basically pan out the abrasive out of the lighter cuttings and recycle it back and just keep using the same abrasive over and over and over again as you're cutting. So
because the Mohs hardness is different. You're not breaking up the
right. The abrasive isn't wearing down. It's going away and getting mixed in with the cuttings, and then so you can just re-separate that in water and bring your abrasive back and reuse it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it was already wet anyway, so
yeah. It's not going to dull until you're encountering something with an equal or greater Mohs hardness. So.
Right. Yeah. So a circular saw theory, like if they could, and if you think about it, like, all right, again, think of the sheer age of what we're talking about. The only surviving things are either what has been locked in tombs or stone out in the weather and buried in sand and such. So a wooden frame, with ropes and treads and whatever, and maybe cloth pulleys, or sinew pulleys or whatever, would not have survived that time, and that metal disc over those thousands and thousands of years may have been claimed before, like what we consider modern archaeology would say, no, we got to preserve that. It may have been claimed and melted down to use for other things. A big chunk of valuable metal right there. Yeah, as soon as those things were done, they were melted down and used for something else.
And here's the thing. The easiest way I can think of to run a big thing like that, besides like a bow drill or whatnot, right? Even if you had to offset the power source to the actual cutting implement, be it a drill, be it a saw, whatever. And it's something that was used in blacksmith shops right up until the 1940s, 1950s, and they still exist today.
Ion power?
And that's a leather belt.
Oh, I've got one of those.
Yeah, but a leather belt drive system.
Oh,
All they
yeah.
would have had to do was have an upright and a thing and a belt going around this way and a twist in it to leather belt drive. And it's something that they could have done. It's easy. It's been around for millennia.
Forever.
Yeah. No evidence of that would survive today, other than in the hieroglyphs and the paintings and whatnot.
Right.
And because there are extensive drawings and whatnot of like the metal shops, like the guys, the smelting and the casting and the forging and all of it. I mean, like so long ago, it's mind boggling.
But they don't have any pictures of cutting granite. Like that's one of the few areas that we don't have much.
That's why there's so many theories of how it's been done, is because there's really not, unless I am completely mistaken, and which is very possible because that happens a lot. Unless I'm completely mistaken, the pictographs and the hieroglyphs, like kind of omit the specifics in the processes.
Well, and to that end, okay. So if you think about what it takes to carve the hieroglyphs, it's kind of a tedious freaking process. It's not just like writing a letter. And so you're not going to write down the mundane shit that you do every day. That you got 30,000 people out here digging a trench. You're not going to write about that because that's been going on for 300 years
Yeah.
and they're still digging it. You're
Now-
not going to write about you're going to write about the fact that you just caught the pharaoh in bed with his brother's wife or something. You know, I mean,
Hold on. If I may,
you're going to carve about the interesting stuff, and then when it comes to the artifacts, the tools of the workmen were continuously recycled. Continuously. I mean, the only ones that exist today are the ones that were accidentally lost, and those are very far and few between. And we have literally on display in the Cairo Museum the remnants of iron tools that were used in the quarrying and construction of the Great Pyramids. So, like when you see academia talking about this, they're like, "Well, they did all this with copper chisels." Well,
no, they
but
didn't.
there are actually iron tools on display found in the workings of these pyramids. So, I mean, like they didn't. I mean, yeah, maybe some of the people were relegated to using copper, but some of the people were using iron. And when we know this because we have some of the tools that were broken off in the grooves and whatnot. And so they did use iron in the construction of the Great Pyramids, and we know this. But then when you talk about the other, I mean, like all of these metals, there aren't that many artifacts because the only ones that survive are the funerary artifacts. The ones that were the ones that were encased in the king's chamber or the pharaoh's chamber and the queen's chamber, and the stuff that were in the burial chambers out in the Valley of the Kings. Well, the stuff in the Valley of the Kings is actually pretty fucking choice.
Yeah.
Pretty on point. Pretty on point. But the stuff that was in the kings and queens chambers in the pyramids was kind of ceremonial and also for show, because you know that wasn't the real stuff. That was the decoy stuff. But that's the only place we find these artifacts, because everything else that was used by common man was recycled. Metal was so precious. It was. I mean, you're not going to just throw away that chisel when it's dull, and or when you've wore it down to a nub. Whatever's left, you're going to send it back, and it's going to be melted down and used again. You know, and so there not a lot of metal stuff survives unless it was misplaced or lost, or you know, being carried by somebody that happened to die and get covered up with the sand. I mean, so there is stuff out there, but not a lot. You know. Not like there would be in today's society, where once something breaks or wears out, we just throw it away. You know what I mean? Like the landfills of today are the archaeological dig sites of tomorrow, and that was even true. I mean, I was talking about earlier in the chat about the Aztecs and whatnot. We know so much about the Aztecs and the Mesa Verde, which are the Pueblo Indians from the about 480 to 1200 AD in the Four Corners area of New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Arizona. We know so much about them because of the trash middens. Because they had like in their big rock dwellings, whatever, they had certain rooms that were just trash middens, and they didn't just throw their trash in there; they threw their dead people in there too. I mean, like they didn't bury their dead. They just they considered the human body to be a husk, and they just tossed it in the trash. And I mean, so like these trash middens would be, you know, they used them for hundreds of years, and they would be just. And we got so much of what we know about their culture and their lifestyle from their landfill.
Isn't there that police phrase, like, you know, you can't hide what's in the trash, or what is it? One man's trash. No, that's not it. Anyway, it's, you know, for, you know, private investigating, digging through somebody's trash, you find all their secrets. You know,
it all comes out in the trash.
It all comes out in the trash. Yes, that's the phrase. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Try to hide that you're eating hamburgers to your vegan girlfriend, and then she sees you're floating in the toilet, and you're like, "Yeah, I'm busted." It all comes out in the trash.
So when Alexis was saying about, you know, they've been digging that trench for 300 years, there's another thing, an interesting thing that I wanted to comment. There's a split in the historical community. A lot of people, or as a lot of people know it, between whether these great monuments were built with slaves or they were built with the citizens and the workmen. We know ancient Egyptians had slaves. I have a 50-50 idea about that. Because of course during the flood season they couldn't do anything for their land or whatnot, because the lands were flooded and stuff like that. And it's fairly well known that during these periods that's when they go and do their public work. So they'd work on the pyramids and all that type of thing. I actually think, like for example, if I was in ancient Egypt and I had a house, I owned a farm and was doing farming and all that type of stuff, and I had slaves and workers, I wouldn't be leaving them at home while I went and worked on these public works. It'd be me and my guys. We're going to work for the king. So, I would be responsible for overseeing my staff.
Okay, so my take on this, the only evidential, okay, so humans have owned slaves for all eternity. I mean, that's just up until, well, okay, so it still exists today. And I mean, as sad as that is, that still exists, but in minutia. But for all of human eternity, I mean, when you conquered another tribe, you took their people. I mean, it's like you're going to do work for me, and I will feed you. I mean, anyways, so the city around the base of well, not city, but the work camp that's around the base of the pyramids at Giza housed something like 30,000 people, and in the writings there were 800 supervisors.
Mm-hmm.
There are 800 people overseeing 30,000 workmen. If those 30,000 workmen there's no way 30,000 workmen were slaves, because there's only 800 bosses. And I mean, like, it only takes about 1,600 people to get rid of, 800. I mean, so it doesn't really make sense that it was just all slave labor. The only reason that I think, it's my opinion, that the idea of the pyramids and the Egyptian civilization being built on the backs of slave labor is because of the accounts in the Bible. Because that is, as far as I'm aware of, the only
written history that states that.
The only documentation,
that's
that albeit is also 4,000 years older or newer than when it happened, but that it claims that it was all done by slave labor. And so people in mass tend to accept that as truth today because of where that information is located. And I just don't think that's feasibly. I don't think it's feasible.
No. And that's why I said, like if I was going out and say I had 5 or 6 slave workers, they could have been really well treated. We don't know enough about the minutiae of the day-to-day lives, but I would take, it would be me and my boys. We're going to work for the king. I might be an artisanal blacksmith. I might be, the metal worker. So, and my boys work in my workshop. They're just as skilled as me. We now have this job to do where I'm the boss of those 5, and then I report to, my area manager, which reports to right up to those 800 big supervisors.
Yeah.
Right. And we do know, I mean, like, because the camp around the bottom here that they recently excavated maybe 10, 15 years ago, I don't remember. But I mean, there were bakeries, and I mean, like basically it was a full functioning city with everything you would need. I mean, they were feeding the people, they were clothing there were the tailors, there were the blacksmiths, or coppersmiths, or whatever you want to call them. Well, I'm just going to call them blacksmiths for ease of
reference. Yeah.
Metal. And then the people that were making the food, there were people that were bringing the food on the boats. I mean, like, this was a massive operation that spanned the entire Nile River Valley.
Right.
I mean,
now, if I may, not to completely,
just the building of the pyramids alone, each one of them in 20 to 100 year increments. Some of them took longer than others. Each one of them probably involved the labor in some way of 150 to 200,000 people. I mean, like, all the way from the people harvesting the grain to the people that were shipping the grain, to the people that were loading and unloading the grain, to the people that were milling the grain, to the people that were turning the grain into bread and then baking it. I mean, like this was these buildings behind me were a nationwide effort to build that everybody chipped into. And,
Pun intended.
Well, I mean, okay, well, no, I mean, but this was the richest people in the world.
Yeah. Well, I meant pun intended as in chipping away at stone. I was making a joke.
Away. Yeah. And so, I mean, they weren't necessarily compensated for all of their efforts in anything other than patriotism, is what we would equate it to today.
Yeah. All right. So
I'm doing my part for the pharaoh that died 3 years ago, and we're finishing his monument so he can be sent to the afterlife.
Right. Now, I will say this, not to derail or put a roadblock on any conversation that we are having, but we're pushing an hour and a half on this episode alone. B, Adam has to get to sleep. I mean, right? And I am absolutely certain that throughout this month we will be retouching up on these topics again, going into a little bit more detail. As we had another thought about what we just talked about, it will probably come up again, and do a brief, quick recap, and then go into the new thoughts. So I kind of want to give us a natural pause point here, because and move into our final thoughts and everything, because we covered the primarily glass and black sand and the possibilities therein of, and then we switched to the tooling for cutting, which is an episode in and of itself, and now we're switching into the social aspect of constructing, not only a national monument, but one of the great wonders of the world. So, plenty. We have a month to talk about this. Plenty to go over. So with that, I'm going to throw a crowbar in and force us into our final thoughts. Keep it short, because my final Alex will go, my final thoughts are, and then there's this whole other blah 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 blah, and Adam falls asleep, and
Look, guys, we've literally been talking about this particular topic. We've been looking forward to it for 6 months.
So we got to restrain. We got to show restraint. Yeah, we have to show restraint, and hey, if it carries over and we do another month on it, like down the line, we'll do another month on it down the line. It's a great topic, and yeah. So with that, final thoughts.
I got it. All right. So, before I forgot what I was going to say, literally the initial conversation that started today's episode was 8 hours long.
Yeah, and that was just going over ideas.
We literally got done with the Sunday morning gathering. We went into after show chat, and then we talked for 8 freaking hours. And then it's like, we should do a show. We should record this stuff that we say after the show. Could we do a show on this somehow? Hey, anyways, yeah, but yeah, it was an 8-hour conversation. I mean, like, we got done, and it's like 6:00 in the evening. It's like, but guys, I gotta eat.
I got a show to go do.
Yeah, I gotta sleep.
There is so much I want to touch on this, and I mean, like, and so many different, and so much I want to research, because how much of what I think I know is not mythology, but what's the word when everybody thinks it's true and it's not? Not the Mandela effect, but
the urban myth thing.
urban legend.
Urban
How much
legend.
of what I think I know about ancient Egypt is urban legend, and how much of it is true? I don't really know
Until we
I
do
go
this
looking
show.
into it. Because like literally, I thought until I started researching Egypt, I thought basically humans went Bronze Age, Copper Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, and then when I got into Egypt, I see that well, it's not quite that clear cut. We used iron in the Copper Age. We used iron in the Bronze Age. We used copper or bronze in I mean, we used all of them at the same time, and there was just somehow, that archaeologists put these arbitrary dates to categorize our existence.
I like
And
arbitrary dates.
well, I mean, but I didn't know any of that until I started looking into Egypt, and I was like, I mean, like here they were working iron, 7,000 years ago, and then the Iron Age didn't start until 500 BC, which is what 2,700 years ago. So humans were working iron long before the Iron Age, and I really didn't. I mean, like I had honestly thought that it wasn't really a commonly used thing. So anyway, I learned something, and yeah. So you know what?
Yamas can suck it, right?
Go out there and you know what? I challenge each and every one of you to find something that may have been used in ancient Egypt and try to make it and use it. Because I'm going to. I've already got the materials put together, and I am going to cast a bronze chisel, and I'm going to cut some limestone with it, or attempt to at least. That's what I'm going to do this month, and I've literally got the stuff sitting out here waiting to get it done. I mean, like it's like sitting it's ready to go. All I got to do is light a fire. So, um, see what you can do and have fun with it. So, I will see you guys next week.
My final thoughts, right along with Alexis, like one of the things that have been amazing about this topic is not only just how much like information I've looked into, but I'm still learning completely mind-blowing things like the black sand. That was like, and I thought emery was something that had been used since the time immemorial. But it seems that though it hasn't, and a lot of the things I've learned and theories I've come up with just make practical sense to me. So yeah, I have some of the stuff in order to make it. I really want to see if I can get hold of some cheap copper so that I can see if I can make a small copper bandsaw and see if I can impregnate it with the. You're gonna use that against me.
Hey, copper, you looking pretty saucy.
I knew that was gonna happen. But yeah, no. See if I can put the the garnet into it and see if it can cut the granite.
Don't put your garnet into that. All right. Yeah. So
that's it. That's it. I'm going to bed. Screw you all.
Yep. So, yes, my final thoughts are, I'm psyched to see where we're going with this because, like they both said, when we got to talking about this, off camera, behind the scenes, it's like, yeah, let's make a show of it. And it's like we've turned this stream around or this show, this ongoing show from, me just popping in, going live and reading the chat to actually having topics, actually having things to discuss, actually having a format. And now we have, a theme for this year. And it's like, it's the culmination of, to me, years of work discovering where this channel is going to go. And this is kind of, been the start of it all. And it's great. It's fantastic. We're actually probably not after this because it is really late and we did run late. We're going to record at some point together a kind of a little video explaining everything about the channel, both to those who have been watching for years and for those who come after, who come, from now on. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to the future of Island Metal Forge. And as always, a massive thank you to primarily in this stream, this live stream version of this uploaded video. Thank you to my channel members who are, heart and soul. Love you guys. Big thank you to all the people who watch these videos and put up with all of my shenanigans, trying to throw jokes in and just, everybody going, you're derailing the conversation. Shut up and sit down, Yamez. And big thank you to my co-host, of which I would not be able to be doing this as eloquently as possible without them. So a huge, huge round of applause to everybody. And we found the soundboard on Discord, so we're using it. So, real quick outro from us, Speargrass. I could either play it so you don't have to read it, or you could read it.
Yeah, just play it.
All right, if you all give me a minute,
I don't even have it up.
Yep. And yeah, where does that come up? Transition.
Thank you very much for listening, guys. You can find Yamez on Island Metal Forge on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. You can find Alex at Transcendental Artist Studios on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And you can find me, Adam, at Speargrass Forge on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. If you have any suggestions for Tool of the Week, Metal of the Week, or any other topic, you can leave them under the hashtag Metal of the Week in the YouTube community chat in Discord, or you can email us at impracticalblacksmith@gmail.com. If you found us on Anchor, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, or Google Podcasts, we upload generally every Wednesday, or you can join us live every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's currently 12:30 a.m. Australian Central Standard Time on Monday morning. However, you should check that against your local time, and that's located at the Island Metal Forge YouTube channel. Finally, thanks for joining us, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, or give us a star rating if you found us on one of the podcasts, and we appreciate your support. Now,
thank you, Adam. Or thank you, Robot Adam.
I almost died there. Adam, your background looks like my colon.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and press stop on the recording. We're not going to end the stream just yet. I mean, we will, but just stopping the recording.